Okay, hi everybody. I'm so happy you're here. You may have had other grand plans to do something on a Monday evening, but you're here and thank you for this. We're especially honored today to have Dr. Maria McCauley, the Director of Libraries for the City of Cambridge, President-elect of the American Library Association, and someone who's, based on her resume, does not sleep. We're genuinely grateful that you made it here. Thank you, Maria. So my name is Boaz Nadav-Manes. I'm the University Librarian in Lehigh University Library, in case you don't know me. Hi. I wanted to say something about the fact that we're meeting here today, which is all due to the activities of the Friends of the Lehigh University Libraries and their interest in engaging with our public to support things like we do today, but also supporting some of the exhibits that are on right now. So if you haven't seen them, there is a great exhibit in the Lindemann talking about the role of librarians and our championship of true and accurate information that is timely. And there is also an exhibit in the EWFM, Tending to Our Past, about African American cultural history. So we hope that you're going to go and visit those exhibits and other occasions that we're on. So ALA, beyond, like for me, ALA is more than the association. It's more about a home for vision and strategy and, the public good and all the things that American libraries are hoping to be. That's not the most easy time for libraries in general. If you remember last year, we had the ALA president at the time coming to talk with us as well, and that was the beginning of a political climate that was more challenging. And now we're in the midst of various things that we all try and do while all of it is happening around us. So, beyond the organization that I think we're going to know more about today, also, what does it mean to be an advocate and a leader of how many libraries? It's like 10,000 libraries in the U.S. Is quite a role, and especially at this time. So I'm really curious to learn more about how we can help, but also about the role of libraries like ours. What can we do to kind of make things better to our community here. So we're hopefully going to have a great conversation. I'm sure we will. I wanted to remind you, so like we're going to talk, and then there's going to be, if you have questions or anything, please go to the mics afterwards and ask your questions. In that way, those are recorded as well. Okay? So I'll introduce Maria now. So Maria leads the Cambridge Public Library, so there are like around 166 librarians or so working there, and her career spans from Cambridge, Santa Monica, Somerville, and of Eastern University, and now she's stepping into a role as ALA 2025-2026 president. We couldn't ask for a better guide for this discussion. So please join me in giving a warm, enthusiastic welcome to Dr. Maria McCauley.
Thank you so much. Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for welcoming here, Boaz. It is truly an honor to be here, and I've really enjoyed the conversations that I've already had today on campus. And I'm looking forward to more and also staying in touch with all of you, and I'm learning from all of you as well. To think about the state of America's libraries was a big task, so I hope that I do it justice. I do have a lot of content that I'm covering this evening, and yeah, so let's go for it. So I wanted to start off with a story about how libraries, even from one patron interaction, can be so very meaningful. And I know that the library folks in the room know this from your own experiences. 1 year ago, a woman who was struggling with a mental health crisis came to the Cambridge Public Library seeking connection. And in a period of social isolation, she found solace at the library. She was struggling, and a staff member, a librarian colleague, recognized this and spoke with her until closing. And then our social worker connected her with mental health resources. A few months ago, we received an email from that patron, and she wrote to us to express her gratitude for the assistance and care that she received from this staff member. And she said that the staff member's compassion and professionalism during that time, which was a vulnerable time for her, led her to get the help she needed. And she also shared that she's now stable, and she's started graduate school in social work to help others who have complex mental health conditions. And for this patron, this small act of kindness set her on a path to healing and a future career. And I think that this, to me, illustrates, and there are so many different stories around how library services change people's lives. And I would say that libraries have had to change, as societal pressures have changed. I believe that our libraries support living, learning, and strengthen community connection. Our libraries promote literacy, preserve culture, and ensure access to information. And our libraries are truly the hearts and hubs of our communities. That's one of the things that Boaz and I were talking about, is how Lehigh University, that your libraries are the most popular spaces on campus, and they're beloved. I wanted to share where I'm situated with my home institution. Cambridge Public Library, we have 7 libraries and 6.5 square miles for a population of approximately 120,000 people. This is our main library. On the left-hand side is our stone building, which was constructed in 1890. The right-hand side is the modern wing, which is about 16 years old now. And we really work on trying to welcome all, inspire minds, and empower a community. And we have this mission to help people live their very best lives through the equitable provision of library services. Some context in terms of statistics. Last year, we welcomed 1 million visitors, circulated 1.9 million items. That equates to approximately 16 items per average resident. And we hosted more than 4,500 free programs. As centers of learning, knowledge, and gathering hubs, our libraries advance our democracy and help our communities to connect, learn, and thrive. Our collections and programs help people to learn more about others and themselves. We were talking about this earlier today. And our libraries strengthen the research enterprise and help to create a more literate society. Our libraries and preserve and make available our diverse histories and advance research and foster knowledge creation. One of our foremost library and information science researchers, Dr. Nicole Cook, shared with me that when she started her area of research it was because she saw a picture of a black and brown graduate students at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in a newsletter and became obsessed with knowing who they were. She said, this was the very first time that I could see myself, a little bit of myself, at the University of Illinois. And her article, the GSLS Carnegie Scholars Guests in Someone Else's House, allowed other black and brown library and information science students to feel validated in their graduate school journeys. The university archives, who retained things like report cards for these students, allowed Dr. Cook to tell parts of the stories of this group of phenomenal students, and they would otherwise have been ignored. Our archives play a really important role of preserving and making accessible our histories. We have a lot going on in libraries, including right-to-read challenges, budget cuts and concerns about the economy, the proliferation of misinformation, and, of course, recent federal actions. We are uncertain about the economy. This is a time when there is low consumer confidence, a tightening job market, and a decrease in revenues in some communities. We have experienced threats to the Institute of Museum and Library Services, funding for libraries, scams and fake news, and concerns about the integrity of AI sources and of some developers. As you know, universities have experienced a lot of federal action. For example, federal actions exerting pressure on specific academic institutions and forcing universities to remove references to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some universities have received funding freezes, and there is, in general, a lot of uncertainty about federal funding for research. There are almost 125,000 libraries of all types across the country working toward important missions, visions, and values. And over 366,000 library workers nationally who are advancing library services. This includes, of course, information literacy, the use and understanding of technology, and advancing intellectual freedom. And I have to say, each one of these libraries deserves an hour, but I can't do that. So my talk will be an overview with plenty of sources to consult if you want more information, including my own information. There are a lot of challenges, and I also have been heartened by powerful coalitions of people working together across library types, across institutions, and across the nation to overcome hurdles facing libraries in our communities. And this is a very recent example, a coalition of 33 major publishers, national library and literacy advocacy groups. They all denounced directives from the Tennessee Secretary of State warning public libraries to review their collections for age appropriateness and consistent with President Trump's executive order on gender identity. And I want to name the groups because I think it's important to recognize that there are many different people working on advocacy and intellectual freedom. ALA, Penguin Random House, Macmillan Publishers, Simon & Schuster, GLAAD, the National Coalition Against Censorship, Lambda Literary, We Need Diverse Books, American Booksellers for Free Expression, Every Library, Authors Against Book Bans, and the Freedom to Read Project, and the work ensues. So this isn't the first time that a need for a coalition of library workers has arisen, and your great state of Pennsylvania has played a pivotal role in ALA's formation. In 1876, during the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, 103 librarians responded to a call for a convention for librarians to be held in October at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. The aim of the convention was to enable librarians to do their present work more easily and at less expense. And attendees came from as far west as Chicago and even as far as England. And at the end of the meeting, a register was distributed for all to sign who wished to become charter members. And so the American Library Association was born. And today it is a large nonpartisan nonprofit organization dedicated to America's libraries. And it's almost 150 years old. And it has provided resources for information professionals to transform their communities through essential programs and services, to enact change on a national level. And it is an institution that scaffolds emerging librarians, library staff, and supporters. We were talking about that today, so I just want to message that in, as they all work to support the future of library services. This is from about ALA, and this is a campaign that ALA coordinated, which was a drive for books for World War I fighters. So I just love that even back then, ALA was doing a lot of good work on behalf of people. Okay. We talked about this earlier today, just a little bit of background information. We have divisions within ALA. There are roundtables. Roundtables are a great way for people to get involved with ALA. ALA has an executive director and staff who fall underneath the executive director. So they manage, for example, the personnel side of the work and the daily business of the organization. The executive board oversees the strategic direction of ALA, and the council enacts policies on behalf of the American Library Association. And I want to invite, we had a robust conversation and debate today about different ways membership could be done, but I do invite you to become a member of ALA. Updates. ALA's areas of advocacy focus have been intellectual freedom, investing in libraries' civic and broadband infrastructure, and advocating for libraries on a national level. We'll also get into some of the advocacy work specifically within the Association of College and Research Libraries. Intellectual freedom, as you know, is a core pillar of library services and one of ALA's prevailing strategic priorities, and censorship still continues to be a challenge in the United States. Last year, there were 821 attempts to censor library books and materials across all library types, reported to the ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom. This is a decrease from 2023, when there were reported 1,247 attempts to censor library materials. However, it is still the third highest number of book challenges recorded by ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom since it began documenting censorship of library materials in 1990. And we know anecdotally that censorship persists, but there is a fear of reporting. And so we are seeing a rise in silent and soft censorship. And this might look like an administrator quietly removing a title, based on feedback from a prominent community member. And of course, this is concerning. So what was the majority of those challenges, and who is making them? They target stories about people of color, stories about LGBTQ+ individuals, and stories about identity and truth and justice. And the majority of book censorship attempts, they now originate from organized movements. So rather than maybe a community member saying, I have personal offense, that still happens, but the majority are people who are coming in with like lists because they saw it somewhere that they should be challenging these books. They don't necessarily have read them, but these pressure groups initiated 72% of demands, 72% of demands to censor books in school and public libraries. We have a Banned Books Week. I hope you all participate. And so this last year's theme was Censorship is So 1984. I really loved that theme. Read for your rights. Here is an exhibit from Cambridge. Some of our talented staff members put this together and try to pull the books out of the flame, so to speak. And a lot of places do wonderful displays during Banned Books Week. And there are lots of resources available, bannedbooksweek.org. There is a Banned Books Week coalition. And Boaz was just telling me that Policy has a joint statement with some other organizations on free speech needs free libraries. And I think that that's a really powerful message as well. You probably know about Unite Against Book Bans, but please go to the Unite Against Book Bans site, and everyone, community members, your loved ones, they can take actions by going to that site, and it helps people to know how to help to defend the right to read. State library legislation updates. So I wanted to give you the latest information about what is happening at the state level. In Arizona, there is a bill, HB 2008, which prohibits public libraries in Arizona from using public funds to pay dues or membership fees to professional library associations that are dedicated to promoting and supporting libraries and librarians. And of course, this is very concerning to the profession. This also includes similar bills that were passed in, for example, Iowa, or previously introduced in states including Iowa, Texas, and Louisiana. In Wyoming, sexually explicit materials in libraries requirements was a bill that was drafted, and there was a hearing in August of 2025. The bill defines sexually explicit in broad and vague terms and would impose steep fines of up to $50,000 for each violation on libraries who violate the requirements. The Wyoming Library Association and community members, including faith leaders, testified against this bill during its hearing. And it also would be very costly. New Hampshire, SB 33 and SB 434, they are introducing similar bills, and these are regarding challenge policies. So there are some parts that are good and then some parts that are concerning. So with, for example, SB 434, this requires school districts to have and post challenge policies. That's considered best practice in the library field. How do you actually do a challenge? However, the language justifying removing materials is very broad. It says harmful to minors, inappropriate, age inappropriate, or otherwise offensive or inappropriate. That's very broad language. And then while harmful to minors is defined, the broad language opens up the possibility of removal based on viewpoint discrimination. And second is that the initial challenge is to the principal. So if the principal, Boaz principal, decides to remove the book, there is no apparent route to appeal. So once they remove it, and then it just kind of ends. There are some positive pro-library legislation as well. So in New York, the Freedom to Read Act was passed by the New York State legislature, but is not yet signed by the governor. And this requires the Commissioner of Education and School Library Systems to develop policies that empower school libraries and library staff, specifically certified library media specialists, to curate and develop collections. And we will see, but it is hopeful that that will pass. And then I also just want to note a few other things that are happening that is not legislation, but interesting. In Tennessee, we know about the Tennessee, so that this is the one about the age appropriateness, and ALA has publicly denounced this directive. Alabama, the Alabama Public Library Service Board, it oversees all public libraries in Alabama. They voted on November 20th, 2025, to remove all depictions of transgender people, transgender procedures, gender ideology, or the concept of more than two biological genders from the sections aimed at minors in public libraries. And this policy change is clear viewpoint discrimination, especially given that the committee does not define gender ideology. And so, of course, that opens the door to any discussion of gender across all viewpoints being forbidden in the juvenile or YA collections. And this is also kind of an interesting one. The city of Sacramento had on the books a 1949 law prohibiting the sale of comic books to minors. This was in the mid-20th century. Comic books, as they were on the rise, there was fears about the negative impact on children, some saying this could lead to illiteracy or inspire violent crime. And so there were these regulations on the books, and that has been repealed. And in Massachusetts, I am happy to share that the Freedom to Read bill passed just recently, just weeks ago, in the Senate, and now it goes to the House. And many people worked on this. I helped with testifying, as did so many other people, so I want to make sure I give credit to everybody who worked on this. And I testified in support of S 2328, an act regarding freedom of expression. And this act is a vital piece of legislation that protects the fundamental American right to free speech, free inquiry, and the right for Massachusetts residents to form and express their own opinions as laid out by the First Amendment and the Massachusetts Constitution. And there were authors, publishers, readers, library representatives throughout this whole process, and they all testified in support of the freedom to read. And I also recently testified in support of effective school libraries, and there were a number of school library advocates who were there to talk about that it's really important to have quality and effective school libraries, and the basis is using the American Association of School Library Standards. Another key initiative which ties to core values of access and equity is civic engagement. I think we're all involved with civic engagement in different kinds of ways. And voting is one of the greatest privileges and responsibilities of United States citizenship. But turnout in national elections is consistently less than 2/3 of eligible voters. And as institutions that provide access to information, resources, programs, public spaces for all, our libraries are cornerstones for civic engagement. In April of 2024, ALA launched the Reader Voter Ready campaign to inform and prepare library workers and supporters to build on this foundation and support voter engagement. And one of the partners was the League of Women Voters. And I was honored to speak at the Boston chapter of the League of Women Voters about libraries' roles in our democracy in Jamaica Plain in June of 2025. You all know too that many libraries do library cards signups and drives, and in September, ALA has a library card sign-up month. Many libraries promote, especially when students get back on campus, to get their library cards. This is a photo of my daughter, Grace, and in Cambridge, you get your library card when you're 5. That's when you qualify. And that's because we go into their rights, and they have agency. And we go into that with them and their caretakers. And when Grace got this, she said all day, "Mom, I can't help it. I can't stop smiling." And I think that's because for her, this is like a very big moment. This is like her first like official card, right? Like of being able to go out and use it in society. And wow, like what a great way to engage civically by using your card and getting anything you want at the public library. As you know, libraries are important places for access points for internet connection. Nearly 8 million households in the United States do not have internet access, and about 9% do not own a smartphone, including 22% of people over the age of 65. ALA applauded the Supreme Court decision to uphold the Universal Service Fund, the system of telecommunications subsidies administered by the Federal Communications Commission. And this includes E-rate, which provides libraries and schools billions of dollars each year for high-speed broadband access and connectivity. And more than half of our public libraries apply for funding to subsidize the cost of internet connectivity through E-rate each year. E-rate is a lifeline for public libraries and the millions of Americans who use our libraries, especially in rural and underserved communities. And our high-speed broadband powers modern library services, and you know this, ranging from online tutoring and employment assistance to telehealth appointments. The justices announced the ruling in the combined cases of FCC versus Consumers Research and SHLB versus Consumers Research, reversing the Fifth Circuit Court's finding that the USF programs, including E-rate, were unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court's decision marks a major milestone in a year-long challenge to the Universal Service Fund. In January of 2025, ALA filed an amicus brief in the proceeding in support of the program and joined other advocates in defending this fund. The Institute of Museum and Library Services supports America's 125,000 libraries with funding, with a wide range of grants, research, convenings to advance library programs and services. Its budget was under $300 million in 2024, which was 0.004% of the $6.95 trillion federal budget. And so what do we get for $300 million? You might say that libraries get from the Institute of Museum and Library Services similar to what scientists get from the National Science Foundation. Research funding, so we can identify emerging needs and best practices in our field. Data collection, so we can benchmark our services. And through the Library Services and Technology Act, small direct grants to libraries for pilots and innovative services and funding for statewide e-resources. Those are just a few examples. On March 14th, 2025, the current presidential administration issued an executive order intending to dismantle the Institute of Museum and Library Services. On April 6, 2025, the American Library Association and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees filed a federal lawsuit. In addition, a coalition of 21 states sued the Trump administration over the dismantling of 3 federal agencies that provide services and funding supporting public libraries and museums, workers, and minority-owned businesses nationwide. And this include, of course, the IMLS. On November 21st, 2025, the U.S. District Court for the District of Rhode Island struck down the Trump administration's attempts to dismantle the Institute of Museum and Library Services. I just want you to have the details around all of this. The court ruling found that the administration's actions were arbitrary and capricious and contrary to federal law that established the Institute of Museum and Library Services and directed to carry out its programs, including funding for libraries and museums. The ruling nullifies the administration's actions to dismantle the Institute of Museum and Library Services and permanently prohibits the administration from taking such actions in the future. And the ruling had immediate nationwide effect. And then related to IMLS funding for next fiscal year, as of September 10th, 2025, both Labor, Health, and Human Services, Education, and Related Agencies, LHHS, appropriations committees in the Senate and the House of Representatives have moved forward with bills that include a small increase in funding for the Library Services and Technology Act. And we are waiting more. So advocacy for the Institute of Museum and Library Services is what has happened in terms of advocacy is wonderful, and we also need people to advocate for continued funding. This is something to note too. The White House has recently announced new steps toward dismantling the Department of Education, and this includes moving key programs that support both school and academic libraries to other federal agencies, and we're watching this closely. Trends in U.S. libraries. So you know that academic libraries are doing notable work, and public, specials, and school libraries are as well, advancing literacy, offering resources, and providing a lot of life-changing services to patrons. I want to give, I'm going to try to move quickly on this, snapshot of areas of service, emphasis, and also to kind of show how different library types are focusing on various areas. So you know your academic libraries, I'm sure, the best. And the Association for College and Research Libraries is advocating for academic libraries nationally, including on intellectual freedom, privacy, affordability of textbooks, internet access, equity. And academic libraries are providing information literacy support, including the new ACRL AI competencies. So ACRL, the Association of College and Research Libraries, surveyed 1,400 academic libraries in 2023. And just one information point is that digital materials continue to account for a significant portion of the budget, and 98% of circulation. These materials are costly and they're important to your users. So the subscriptions account for 34% almost 35% of total library expenditures. And one other point from that survey is that information services remain academic libraries' area of expertise. U.S. academic libraries reported an average of 3,675 annual transactions, close to 400 consultations, and over 1,300 virtual reference services. I'm sure you're all familiar with the ACRL framework for information literacy, and I have to say, everywhere I've gone, internationally and nationally, this is like the gold standard for information literacy. And so I'm so pleased to see that people are talking and using this framework all over the world. And I'm sure you're aware, but the framework, it defines information literacy as the set of integrated abilities encompassing the reflective discovery of information, the understanding of how information is produced and valued, and the use of information in creating new knowledge and participating ethically in communities of learning. ACRL also has a legislative agenda, and so they work with the Washington office of the American Library Association on moving forward their national priorities. I mentioned them before. One thing I just want to note is with net neutrality, this is important, and it hasn't moved exactly the way that we would love for it to move, but this is the principle that internet service providers should treat all data equally and should not discriminate or provide preference to any data regardless of its source, content, or destination. And internet service providers can block or throttle internet traffic for some or commercialize prioritizing internet traffic and pass increased costs for internet service to others. So there was progress made during the Obama administration to be more protective of this area, and that was rolled back recently. ACRL recently launched the AI competencies for library workers, and so there are some different areas: ethical considerations, knowledge and understanding, analysis and evaluation, and use and application. And Leo Lowe defined AI literacy as the ability to understand, use, and think critically about AI technologies and their impact on society, ethics, and everyday life. Quickly about school libraries. So school libraries have faced a lot of funding challenges, censorship challenges, and are vital partners in the success of a school. They help educators with curriculum, they help students with information literacy, and so advocacy and support of school libraries is also quite important. And our association, American Association of School Libraries, they are doing great work. They published the second edition of their National School Library Standards. And this new edition, it expands upon the student, school librarian, and school library evaluation process. And they also have a new book out on leveraging AI in school libraries. Some places are mandating to have incorporation of AI. For example, one of the author of this book, Delandris Seals, was telling me that in North Carolina, it's actually mandated, so they had to move quickly on helping people to learn how to teach students and educators on how to incorporate AI. Urban Libraries Council is a group that does work on looking at major metro areas. And then there's also the Public Library Association. For time's sake, I'm not going to go into the details of this report, but it is an interesting report to go in and look at. And PLA's study or survey from 2022, it shares that public libraries work falls within the core service areas of literacy, educational achievement, digital equity, and civic engagement, all themes that we've talked about tonight. Most libraries, public libraries, offer election services such as voter registration, ballot drop-off, serving as a polling place. I don't know if you've gone to your public libraries to do voting, but a lot of libraries offer those services. Summer reading programs. Many of you probably grew up participating, and now a lot of libraries offer summer reading for adults as well. Services for GET and diploma students and English language learners. And one of the things that Boaz and I were talking about is that with public libraries, so much of their work is done through partnerships. And one example of a partnership in Cambridge is working with the schools, the superintendent, the mayor's office on moving the dial on how many kindergartners get their library cards. And it used to be an opt-in program where permission slips were sent home through the schools. And we would get back maybe 50, 60% of permissions to give public library cards to kindergartners. And now it is an opt-out process. And this took a while, like on the back end, because we needed to make sure that data security was sound. There were two readings in front of the school committee. But once that was set up, then our IT person and the schools could talk, and now it's over 95% of 5-year-olds get their library cards in the public schools in Cambridge. So public libraries, the data is showing that they are integral to their communities, they're facing challenges, and their roles continue to evolve. There are different literacies that we look at that are priorities. Some of you might have looked at this. I think we really try to look at, I think I'm messing this up, but we try to look at literacies in different kinds of ways, from health literacy, financial literacy, food literacy, media literacy, information literacy, data literacy, and digital literacy. I don't know how to get back into here. And then the Pennsylvania libraries have a Pennsylvania Forward Literacy Initiative where they're taking those multiple literacies. Thank you, I'm sorry. Got a little wild there. And they are really pushing forward the understanding of multiple literacies. Digital equity is a primary area for public libraries, and I'm assuming that many different library types are working on digital equity as well. And this is tied in some ways to, to broadband access, but with digital equity, of course, we're concerned about equitable access, not just to technologies, but also the skills building opportunities around them. So one of the stories that I wanted to share is in Cambridge, we have a digital equity initiative, as many public libraries do. And in a recent one-on-one tech help session, a first-generation college student gained a free refurbished laptop, a hotspot, and a LinkedIn Learning Access. And with these tools, he became the first person in his family to graduate from college. Now he's pursuing his dream of launching a tech empowerment and social justice small business to uplift his community. And this collaboration turned the digital divide into a community-driven bridge, providing technology access and skills that create conditions for self-empowerment, economic mobility, entrepreneurship, and digital inclusion. Another area that we've talked a little bit about is in civic engagement. And one of the things that I wanted to mention about civic engagement is there are lots of different ways to do this, right? There could be programs. I've heard Boaz was telling me about like a theater thing where you opened up and people came in and did had a creative evening. The Brooklyn Public Library hosts debates, classes for seniors, and so elders participate in debates on various topics in San Jose, California. The public library holds a speech and debate, a global citizenship course, and kids are taught about a variety of social issues, and they are able to practice their public speaking and presentation skills. And we work with a group called Innovators for Purpose. They are an incredible group where they work with students in middle school, diverse middle school and high school students, and the whole idea is around STEAM and STEM learning. And so they're learning design thinking, they're brushing up on math skills, they're actually getting real world experience, like Kendall Square, for example. Different companies commission them to do work. They created an augmented reality exhibit during the pandemic to give voice of how they were feeling about the pandemic and the death of George Floyd. And these kids are going off to pursue STEM in higher education, including the past cohort. All 8 students went off to college, and I believe 2 of them got into Ivy League schools. So our libraries are stronger, and we achieve mission when we work together. So I would just encourage people to think about that. Like, how can we partner? We partner with the Kennedy School on a library card registration campaign, and that partnership through starting to table and work with the Kennedy School. Now we're partnering on an event that's forthcoming on democracy and libraries. And we also present many Radcliffe scholars to come in for our programs and to interact with staff, similar to what we're doing today. So sorry about that. So I push this to go forward. I'm gonna try this again. So my call to action is our libraries, our associations, and champions of libraries. We are all working together to address societal changes, seize opportunities, and deliver the best in innovative programs and services so people can live their very best, informed lives. And where there is our need, our libraries, our library workers, and our partners work to find creative solutions. And this is why library work and advocacy are so important. When the federal government cuts funding for educational institutions and libraries that support our communities, learning and opportunity, especially for our most vulnerable, our libraries and advocates do what they can to help. When special interest groups vilify the stories and lived experiences of marginalized groups, our libraries safeguard the freedom to read. when misinformation spreads, our libraries equip patrons with tools and approaches to stay informed. When inequities and divisions persist, libraries empower patrons to engage civically and engage with each other. And so I encourage everyone to get involved in advocacy efforts, and thank you for the people in the audience who are already doing this. I believe that if we lift up the work of library workers and our beloved libraries across the country, our communities will also lift us up. I hope this talk spurs thinking about how we can support the research enterprise, expand the discovery of work of researchers, data management, accessibility, literature reviews, reference management and recording, curriculum research, information literacy and strategies for learning applications of AI. Those are just some of the thoughts that I have from talking from some of you and talking to other academic librarians and researchers on various campuses. And I would ask that faculty and students to tap into the talents of library workers, and for library workers to keep up your efforts to find out what your community really needs. And we are more resilient and more effective when we lift each other, and when we work together, change happens. I want to thank everybody. It's just been really wonderful so far, and I appreciate the connection and conversation and areas where we can all work to support each other more, and information that I can bring back to the American Library Association. I want to thank Boaz, Nada, Jason, and the Friends for your support today. And I just want to close by saying, as centers of learning, knowledge, and gathering hubs, our libraries truly advance our democracy and help our communities to connect, learn, and thrive. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the technical issues with the slides.
So that was great. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
We got those two mics here. If you have questions for Maria about anything that you saw, go for it. And thank you for being here. I'll start with a softball.
Okay.
Okay. So, like you talked, like that picture of your daughter with the card was so amazing. And I was kind of thinking, like when both my parents are librarians, and like when I grew up, it was like, well, what do you do? Like in kindergarten, and I had no clue what my father is doing. And that was years ago when it was all books and and all of that. And like I just couldn't understand it. I think at the age of your daughter. So I'm kind of curious, like what do you tell your daughter nowadays? What is it that like you covered all those amazing things, from advocacy to engagement to like civic, understanding through AI to, like all those things. What's is there like a simple way to explain things if you kind of need to answer a Boaz question?
Yeah, so I think it's fun to think of libraries as these incredible places where, any opportunities abound. I wouldn't say that to her. I wouldn't say opportunities abound, Grace, but what I might say is that libraries help people to live their very best lives. And I think, that's a broad view of libraries, but I really think that that's true. And I think that cuts across all library types, is that we really do empower people to live their very best lives, often through knowledge creation, provision of materials, knowledge creation, people taking that information and making, and translating it for themselves, and making meaning of ideas. But it really is the place, really one of the only places in our communities that people can come to explore freely. And one of the things I like to say about the public library, and I have said this to my kids, is there's no other place you can go in a community where you do not have to pay a dime to be in a space, and you can spend all day. You can start your day, it is like we were talking about choose your own adventure. It is like choose your own adventure, where you could get up, go to the library, read a newspaper, read a book, take a yoga class, go into the silent reading room, meet up with a friend for a lecture, bring your kids for a story time, and go in the evening to see a musical performance before heading home. There are just so many different ways that the library is there for our communities.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maccabee. Also say who you are by the means of the question.
Not on. Okay. Maccabee. I work in the Lehigh Libraries. I have a Kindle in my pocket. I borrow way too many books every year. You talked about joint advocacy with publishers against some bad legislation. I'm wondering about, though, from the public library perspective, what's new in relations with publishers on things like ebook terms, right? I know it's been pretty predatory in the past with like ebooks disappearing after a few weeks and a few numbers of borrows. Has that gotten any better in the last few years? How much is it impacting budgets of public libraries? And what, as a patron, I feel bad every time I borrow an ebook because I feel like I'm supporting that predatory pricing, like I'm, costing the library a huge amount of money with another having to rebuy the same book, right? So what can patrons do to help their public libraries in the realm of that predatory ebook pricing?
Yeah, thank you so much. So so there is a lot happening, and I think it has gotten a little bit better. So for example, some of the very extreme examples of where things would just be priced exorbitantly and then you couldn't even get it at first, there's been a lot of advocacy around that. And there's still a lot more work to do. So ebooks do cost libraries more than if you were to buy a title yourself. And so there is a lot of discussion, there is advocacy. There are some states who are looking at bills to work on ebook pricing. Massachusetts is one of them.
Just to give a sense on Maccabee's question, if you don't know, so regular books cost like 100%, let's say, ebook costs 150%, and then streaming, movie costs, copyright, whatever, so like $200, $250, $300. And as we transition towards digital inclusion of information, all of it is more expensive. So like we're kind of trying to deal with those things without getting additional money necessarily to do those. And I was also like, just to continue with Maccabee, like it's really interesting to look at the new partnerships that are being formed. Like kind of when I'm thinking about Penguin, like usually I'm kind of thinking about, like the big 5 publishers that we kind of usually need to think about terms of sharing, controlled digital lending. We had a whole kind of discussion how to make it more used or, like a regular lending behavior of libraries. And that has not finalized in the best way, that libraries wanted it, at least for now. But those new partnerships around advocacy or like, this is a really interesting kind of way to go about strategic goals in the future. Do you have other examples of like things like that kind of emerged in the last 2 years that were sort of unusual, Yeah. Like we do a lot, like on the open source side, we're kind of thinking, like maybe this is time to own the means of production, like the best way we can, right? Like to create a code, protect the content and other things like that. But I don't know if, like.
Yeah,
what are
so the thing that comes to mind is around with intellectual freedom work, that there are some really interesting alliances and partners. So I went to a presentation where somebody was talking about her church, like that there are different faith alliances who have joined on different intellectual freedom groups, and like this person explained that how they introduced it to their church, and that it wasn't necessarily something I would have imagined like that would have happened like easily. And I think that there was a very careful explanation around the reasons behind intellectual freedom, and that this is a stake we want to have because religious freedom is, of course, concern to folks. So that was interesting to me. And there are other groups, like, for example, sororities, fraternities, Black sororities, who have also joined various alliances around intellectual freedom.
Okay, so you've been in academic private institutions, and you kind of ended up now this and more as the ALA president incoming. Tell us a little bit about your lessons, kind of like you've been, how many, like 20 plus years in this profession.
Plus, yeah.
And like what would you suggest in terms of like, librarians that are kind of caught in the middle of all of this stuff that is happening right now, and trying to do the right thing for the organization, the association, the country, the person, what can you share with us, Maria?
Yeah. So there are a lot of different things that might seem like soft leadership that I think are really important. So for example, in public libraries, we do have a lot of instances that can be stressful to our library workers. For example, somebody has trauma themselves, they can, it can be stressful, really stressful interaction. So having professional staff on hand who can help to unpack situations, like our social worker, is really helpful. Another is just being aware of different resources and trainings. For example, Urban Librarians United, I think that's the name of the group. They have where you can call and do like a group session, and that can be helpful as well. So being aware of various kinds of resources, doing good organizational kind of soft work, but is, I think, vital. So for example, making sure that managers are aware of what are inclusive meeting practices. And that's not something that seems like obvious, or maybe seems obvious, but it's important, I think, to try to articulate. So we do things like try to start a meeting where people have the opportunity to give voice. It might be an icebreaker, it might be some way of people being able, usually it's an icebreaker, and then going through the agenda, making sure that there is a way for people to close as well. We have a tradition in Cambridge of pluses and wishes, where, Boaz, thank you so much. Do you have any pluses or wishes to share? And so it's a way for the community of library workers to be able to say, this is something that was really helpful to me in this meeting. I wish that we could have had a break in the middle, or it could be something broader than that is just on somebody's mind. Doing work around group norms. So sometimes I think people don't want to take the time to do it, or it feels a little frivolous, but making sure that people have a group understanding of how we want to work together. And we've done that. So we have, we call it our ways of being, And these were developed like by staff, and it is kind of like, so one is like to presume positive intention, and we were very thoughtful about those words, and I think it's helpful, like it just kind of disrupts making an assumption and saying, maybe I should just pause and check in with that person. And then personally, like I try to do a lot of wellness work as well. So I don't know if you know this, I'm a certified yoga teacher and a Reiki person, and I meditate every day, and just for really 5 minutes, but for me that really helps to create, I guess, expansiveness and the ability for me to be able to hold a lot of complexity and be open to listening.
Thank you. What do you all want to know more about? Here we go. Yes.
Hi, I'm Emily Doyle. I was in college libraries, and now I'm in public libraries. And I was wondering if you've seen any great collaborations between the two.
Yeah, so we are surrounded in Cambridge by wonderful academic institutions, and there are lots of opportunities where we try to like share, for example, when we have speakers. I talked about the library card campaigns. We worked with one of the Harvard groups during a time where they didn't feel that welcome necessarily, and so we hosted a conference on behalf of this one group. It was like black female academics, and it was wonderful to be able to host them and work in collaboration with some of the units on campus. And I think that they really, appreciated having a place where they felt in a more, place that was a little bit a different kind of environment. So there are lots of different possibilities. I think actually there are so many possibilities to work with public libraries in a variety of ways. And so I would encourage you to just, to think creatively. Northeastern University, I'm sure some of you are aware of this, did the Boston, they documented after the bombing at the Boston Marathon, like how people were feeling about that time period, including like kids' artwork. And so that was something that I thought was really powerful, community, remembrance, and honoring a really difficult situation that was held by a university archives but made available to the public.
We had, during COVID, we had an initiative for special collections that was not solely ours, others did the same, but we recorded the experiences of people in the community facing challenges during COVID, and we talked with the public library, like it was a partnership with the public library. The challenge is to kind of make it real, that like this university library is really engaged and interested in your health, your well-being, and you is like the community, not just the Lehigh community, but beyond it. And, developing trust around us as an organization and as, a good keeper of those resources is just hard. I mean, everybody here kind of is coming with the best intention. Do you have like ways to kind of bridge that kind of wall that there is, like, like from things that you've experienced? Like, how do you tell the story in such a way that, bring the people to the library in that's kind of the best way possible, that we can serve many people coming from different perspectives and histories to our libraries? It's a big question, but
Yeah, I love that question. So I think part of it is being in the community, right? Like going, not just being at your own institution, but if you can, right? It depends on resources, but trying to get out sometimes to community events, sometimes just being embedded. But I also think it's like one-on-one building trust. So I see all of our library people as, how would I describe it? As ambassadors for the library. So here's an example. Our archivist, Alyssa, who's incredible, she has really built a lot of trust with the Black community in Cambridge. And a lot of our collections highlight the Black community of Cambridge. And so this has taken years where she's built these relationships, but a really powerful partnership that she was able to do is work with a local artist, Alyssa Hamilton, and the Foundry, which is a nonprofit makerspace, and they and the Arts Council, and the artist created an exhibit of people's voices. I think it's approximately 100 community members' voices, mostly Black voices. And that's in an old jukebox. She created records of their faces. It's on permanent display at the Foundry. 50% of those oral histories were recorded at our archives, and all of the recordings are preserved at the library. It really was like a profound partnership, but that was, after many, many years of building relationship and trust. Sometimes it takes a long time.
thank you. Okay, last question. AI. So give us as I think most people here know, we are like at the forefront of AI work, and there is a university mission to, explore, play, make it real and practical. And lots of the library staff at Lehigh are busy doing that stuff, like almost everybody actually in the library at this point. And there's always like this haunting question how to do it the best way, and how to do, and also like at the beginning of this revolution or evolution or whatever we call it, there was a real worry about like jobs, and you said something earlier today about us being still relevant, no matter what's going to happen. I agree. But can you give us a sense of like how ALA is dealing with this challenge now? And I know that there was just released, right, this kind of intellectual, kind of like this thought-provoking document. But kind of what do we do as a profession, when it comes to that? And it's not as like the iceberg that came with the electronic material that we could adjust over time. Like this is like quite immediate, right? Like all the things that are on our minds.
Yeah, so I can talk as somebody individually who's looking at the field, and then I know that ALA has the new serial competencies, and then there's also a group who is a task force, I think, who's working on like some policy work within ALA, and we'll see where that lands. But in terms of my looking at the field, like as an individual, I mean, it's interesting to me. I do think that university libraries, academic libraries are more in the vanguard of playing with, learning about, helping educators. And I would say that school librarians are also starting to do that because their users are using AI all the time. Publics, I think, are starting, but a lot of municipalities and local governments are just getting around to forming their own policies on AI. And for example, in Cambridge, the city just recently came out with a policy around AI use for municipal workers. And so, we had committees who were working, but we had to see where the city was also going to land. And I think that there's a lot of hesitancy, maybe in public libraries, around like the ethics around AI. However, many people are using it, right? Like you say that people at Lehigh are experimenting with AI. I would say that that's all everywhere. Even if people aren't like, I'm using AI. I mean, you can't not use it, right? Like if you do an internet search, you're using AI. And it is embedded, and it will continue to be, embedded in all of the systems that we are using. So I actually think it's good for us to progress in figuring out how we want to use it, both as workers and also how we want to instruct on using it for our faculty, for our students, and for our community members, because they're going to also have to learn how to use it. And in fact, the workforce, if you work especially in technology, you have to be able to understand it, just like any other emerging technology.
Yeah, it's kind of just a quick follow-up. When libraries were starting to close up during COVID, there was this kind of spreadsheet that we all looked at, who's closing when, and there were sort of realistic ways to accommodate the challenge, and I wonder how you translate policy that is quite high level with the assessment of tools and processes and all of that. And I've been asked that many times myself, how do we go about it in the library? And I think we are kind of developing our own sort of subjective, way to go about those things. And quite often I think people are going to be looking at organizations that are kind of conduit to a voice of all of us in one way or another. And I kind of wonder about several of the things that you were talking about today. Where do we meet, the daily need?
Right.
Is there a way to look at censorship, in a way that there is beyond the advocacy, but also ways to figure out what do we do if there's something about the various tools and processes about AI and all those things. I mean, there's a lot of potential and opportunity for an organization like ALA to really, kind of be advocate in that way, which is hard to do in a big organization, right?
But I really love that point, because I do think there are policies and there are guidelines and practices, and part of what ALA could do and other organizations can help with is to give those examples as we progress, right? So ACRL now has these competencies. The AASL, the school librarians have, a book and I saw an amazing instructor on helping people with a pragmatic way to bring it into the classroom. So, as people are learning about this, then how are they actually applying it? And that can be, a continuation, I think, of our learning. And that's something that I can bring back. I think that's a really, it's a pondering, and I think it's a really good point. And then one example that I would give around intellectual freedom, because that's a question you asked, is I had mentioned that in Cambridge that 5-year-olds come into their library card rights. And so what does that actually mean? That means that we go over when somebody signs their name that they are getting a library card, what it means with the caretaker and with the child, that they actually the child has complete agency to choose what they want to read, and that their card is theirs, it's their privilege. Of course, parents still have, a lot of control over their child, but we want to make it clear that this is their card and that they have rights as an individual. And that's why we don't hand out cards to babies. And that through line, Boaz, is about intellectual freedom, right? So that's a practical example of how we're trying to teach at a very young age, and to caretakers as well, the importance of intellectual freedom. Another example related to the child's development is around reading to babies, like reading ever since babies are newborns. And a lot of people don't know, a lot of educated people don't realize like that it's really important to read to your child like the moment that child is born for early literacy. And so and we could say this like at a policy level, that it's important for people to be ready for kindergarten, that they were introduced to early literacy standards, but it is through libraries who give out baby bags to newborn babies. Cambridge does this. So, and if you have a baby in Cambridge, live in Cambridge, you will get sent to you board books. And this is through partnership with an Agenda for Children and others in the community. But that's like a welcome package, but it's also you should be reading to your babies. And then 1,000 books before kindergarten. Different libraries have this. We participate in this campaign where we are encouraging children and their caretakers to read at least 1,000 books before kindergarten. And you get little prizes, as you check off your bag. But it also is to encourage that early literacy. So there is the policy, and then there's the real practical messaging.
Yep. Thank you very much, Maria. That was great. Like every time that we have such an amazing visitor, like I keep like 20,000 notes on all the things that I wish we would be doing. And this is great. Thanks for the time here and answering our questions and sharing with us your hobby and profession and everything else.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
please
you
feel
all for
free.
being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and feel free to be in touch. Boaz has my information, and I'm happy to chat libraries, leadership, life, anytime.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody.